You are living a reality that isn't completely yours. And maybe you've never noticed. Why do you doubt your memories? Why do you feel guilt even when you did nothing wrong? Why does someone who says they love you make you feel small, confused, unstable? There are mind games designed to break your perception, manipulate your emotions, and control your decisions without you seeing it coming. Stay. Because what you are about to discover could change the way you understand your own mind. Faithful development of the original content, emotional narrative style. This game doesn't begin with shouting or obvious violence. It starts in silence. The other person repeats the same story over and over, but with small changes. A detail today, another tomorrow. At first you notice it, but you decide to ignore it. You think that maybe you remember it wrong, and that is where the trap is. Little by little, your mind begins to give in. You wonder if you're exaggerating, if you're too sensitive, if you're misinterpreting things. That constant doubt isn't born from you. It has been sown. The objective is simple and devastating at the same time. To make you distrust your own perception. When you no longer trust your memory, you depend on the other person's version. And when you depend, you lose power. Not because you're weak, but because someone has learned to manipulate your reality from within, without leaving visible tracks. This game doesn't seek to destroy you immediately. It seeks something worse, for you to slowly fade away yourself. Faithful continuation of the original content, emotional and narrative tone. This game isn't based on what is said, but on what is withdrawn. Attention, affection, words. Everything disappears without explanation. One day the connection is intense, close, almost addictive. The next, silence. Cold, distant, inexplicable. Your mind enters a state of alert. What did I do wrong? Why has everything changed so fast? You begin to review every conversation, every gesture, every phrase, not because you want to, but because you need answers. And that need is exactly what the other person seeks to provoke. The silence is not casual. It is a tool. Because when someone withdraws what they previously gave you, your brain tries to recover it at any price. You strive more, you yield more, you adapt more. And without realizing it, you no longer act from your own will, but from the fear of loss. This game doesn't scream, it doesn't threaten, it simply disappears. Until you obey emotionally again. And when the affection returns, even for an instant, you feel it as a relief, not as something normal. And there, the control is already complete. Direct continuation, faithful to the original content and to the tone of the rival channel's script. This game begins in a subtle, almost invisible way. The other person presents themselves as someone who only wants to help you, someone who says they know you better than you know yourself. At first, their words sound protective, even kind. But little by little, something changes. They begin to question your decisions, not in a direct way, but with soft phrases. Are you sure that's what's best for you? I wouldn't have done that. Maybe you're exaggerating. Each comment seems small, insignificant, but together, they form a crack. With time, you begin to doubt your own judgment. What you previously felt with clarity now becomes confusing. You seek their approval before acting. You need to know if what you think is correct, if what you feel is valid. And without realizing it, your confidence no longer belongs to you. The goal was never to advise you. It was to replace your inner voice with theirs. Because when someone manages to make you doubt yourself, they no longer need to impose themselves. You yourself begin to self-control. This game doesn't break you all at once. It wears you down slowly, until believing in yourself seems like a risk. Direct continuation, maintaining the original content and the emotional rhythm of the original script. This game is based on silence. Not on casual silence, but on a calculated strategic one. Suddenly, the person who used to respond quickly stops doing so. Messages are left on read. Calls aren't returned. There are no explanations. At first you think it's a coincidence. Then, you begin to feel discomfort. Did you do something wrong? Did you say something incorrect? Your mind begins to review every conversation, every word, every gesture. Silence becomes a punishment. The most dangerous thing is that there is no direct confrontation. There is no argument that you can resolve. Only emptiness. And you fill that emptiness with guilt, with anxiety, with assumptions that always play against you. When they finally appear again, they act as if nothing had happened. And in that moment you feel relief. A relief so strong that you forget the previous damage. Thus, silence is transformed into a tool of control. It disappears to destabilize you. It returns so that you are grateful for its presence. This game teaches your mind a dangerous lesson. That peace depends on another person. And when you believe that, you are no longer free. Direct continuation, without altering the content or tone of the original script. This game begins with a strange feeling. They make you feel special, but only at times. One day you are unique, essential, irreplaceable. The next you barely exist. That alternation is not accidental. It is the core of the game. When they give you attention, they do it intensely. Deep words, gestures that seem sincere, moments that make you believe there is a real connection. Just when you begin to trust, that attention is withdrawn without prior notice. There is no clear reason. There is no explanation. Your mind tries to understand the pattern. What did you do to lose that special treatment? How can you get it back? And without realizing it, you begin to change your behavior. You adapt. You strive more. You become more complacent. True control isn't in rejection, but in hope. Because you always remember how they made you feel at the beginning. And you believe that if you do the right thing, it will return. That expectation keeps you hooked. With time, you no longer seek a balanced relationship. You seek crumbs of attention that before would have been normal. And so, little by little, the standard of what you deserve is reduced without you noticing. Direct continuation, maintaining the content and tone of the original script. This game isn't based on what they say, but on how they make you doubt yourself. At first, everything seems normal. Common conversations, shared opinions, memories that you believe you lived clearly. But little by little, something begins to not fit. They tell you that you're exaggerating, that you remember incorrectly, that you're interpreting things the wrong way. They don't do it aggressively, but calmly, even with a false concern. That's what makes it dangerous. You begin to question yourself. Did it really happen like that? Did they say that, or did you imagine it? Are you being too sensitive? Each doubt weakens your internal confidence. And the more you doubt yourself, the more you depend on the version of reality that the other person offers you. This game doesn't seek an argument. It seeks to replace your perception. Because when you no longer trust what you think, what you feel, what you remember, someone else can think for you. The most unsettling thing is that from the outside, everything seems normal. No one sees the damage. But inside, your security slowly crumbles. And when you realize it, you no longer know if the problem is in the relationship or in you. Direct continuation, faithful to the content and the rhythm of the original script. This last game doesn't manifest with harsh words or obvious actions. On the contrary, it hides behind silence, behind absence, behind that emptiness that appears just when you need an answer most. Suddenly, the person stops reacting as before. Messages become scarce, responses cold. Conversations are cut off without explanation. There is no argument, no closure, no clear motive. Only distance. And then the real game begins. You wonder what you did wrong. You review every word, every gesture, every decision. You try to correct yourself, adapt, change. Not because they ask you to, but because the silence weighs more than any reproach. This mechanism works because it activates the deepest fear, the fear of losing the bond. And when that fear takes control, you're willing to give in, to be quiet, to accept things that you wouldn't have accepted before. Silence becomes a punishment, in a form of invisible control, because you don't need to shout to dominate someone. It's enough to withdraw and leave them alone with their thoughts. And the most dangerous thing is that many people don't recognize this as manipulation. They call it distance, fatigue, personal space. But when the silence is used to generate guilt, insecurity, and dependency, it stops being neutral. At the end, you no longer speak for fear of making things worse. You no longer ask. You no longer claim. You become small so as not to bother. And without realizing it, you have lost your voice. After traveling through each of these mind games, there is something that becomes impossible to ignore. None of them appear suddenly. They don't arrive as an obvious aggression or as a frontal attack. They install themselves little by little, almost with care, until one day you realize that you no longer react as before. At first, you doubt yourself. Then you justify yourself. Later, you adapt. And when you want to regain control, you discover that you have been living for too long according to rules that you never consciously chose. These games work because they exploit basic human emotions. The desire to be accepted, the fear of rejection, the need for validation, and the terror of being left alone. They are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you are human. But recognizing them changes everything. Because in the moment you understand how they operate, they stop being invisible. You start to notice when a guilt doesn't belong to you, when a silence isn't casual, when a doubt was sown on purpose, and above all, you start to regain something essential. Your ability to decide. No one has the right to mold your behavior through fear, confusion, or insecurity. Healthy relationships don't make you feel small. They don't force you to walk with constant care. They don't take away your voice. If any of these situations was familiar to you, it's not a sentence, it's a sign. An opportunity to set limits, to observe more clearly, and to remember that your value doesn't depend on anyone's approval. Because when you stop playing a game you didn't choose, the control returns to your hands.